Now, a day after reaching Indonesia as part of his three-nation Southeast Asia visit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi began his day by paying homage to the Indonesian national heroes who died fighting in the War of Independence. PM Modi laid a wreath at Kalibata National Heroes Cemetery in the Indonesian capital, Jakarta. This is PM Modi's first official visit to Indonesia. The Prime Minister will be accorded a ceremonial reception at the Presidential Palace, which will be followed by talks with Indonesian President Joko Widodo. Both sides are expected to ink agreements in the fields of defense, space and science and technology. Later in the day, PM Modi will be attending an event organized by the Indian diaspora. After his Indonesia visit, PM Modi will make a brief halt in Malaysia to congratulate the new Malaysian leadership. He will leave for Singapore on 31st of May for a three-day visit, which will be his second official visit to the island city-state. PM Modi has said the focus of his Singapore visit is to enhance the bilateral partnership. He will also deliver the keynote address at Shangri-La Dialogue on June 1st.
India and Indonesia both share a rich cultural history, one that dates back several centuries. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit aims to strengthen that very bond. Bureau Report, WION.
Prime Minister Modi visits Indonesia.
Today I stand at the heart of Jakarta, in front of a monument which celebrates the spirit of independence.
Leverages centuries-old cultural ties. Boosts strategic ties with Jakarta.
Watch full coverage of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Jakarta with me, Kartikeya Sharma.
India acts eased. WION reports live.
I think there would be some amount of easing of business required.
Let's bring you live visuals coming in from Jakarta. Live visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Jakarta. As you can see, he is all set to receive the official welcome ceremony in Jakarta, and there are school children awaiting his presence to welcome the Indian Prime Minister. And it was earlier that we saw Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi laying the wreath at the Kalibata National Heroes Cemetery. And it will be now that Prime Minister will be receiving the presidential grand welcome at the Presidential Palace. And as you can see, these are Indonesian school children awaiting Indian Prime Minister's presence to welcome him. The Prime Minister is on a three-nation visit to Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore. And these three nations, as we know, are part of the ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit is also aimed at boosting the Act East policy, which is to strengthen India's outreach to the southeastern nations in the world, and that includes Malaysia, Indonesia and Singapore. And today is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's day in Jakarta. And to bring us more details, I'm joined in by our political editor Kartikeya Sharma. Let's quickly go across to Kartikeya. Kartikeya, lovely visuals of Indonesian school children awaiting Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit. Run us through the entire schedule for the Prime Minister today.
Yes, see, the basic run-up to the Prime Minister's itinerary is that bilaterals will take place, community event will take place, there will be a meeting of the business forum, a lot of people are coming here. So I think that's a very, very important, I would say, in terms of creating a trust atmosphere with Indonesia. I think it's very important also in context of the fact that infrastructure projects are going to be discussed. It's also important that, and let me put this in context because this is a different issue which I would like to take up, is that India is making up for the lost decade. India lost out with Indonesia in 1960s and 70s. There was a time in 1960s when India went to war with Pakistan because Pakistan attacked India. Indonesia ended up supporting Pakistan. So, India lost a lot of friends in neighborhood because of the Cold War. India lost a friend in Myanmar, India lost a friend in Indonesia. So I think India is trying to make up for that lost decade. And I would say simply that India wants to do it is because there's an Indian diaspora. Indian diaspora is India's muscle. Please understand that Indian diaspora is not a tamasha song and dance show which happens all the time. Indian diaspora is one component of the diplomacy. What was colonialism? It was diaspora of people from an overpopulated country in Europe, and they colonized people with lesser technologies. So Indian diaspora is all about digital technologies, media, working class professionals.
Right.
And there is no colonialism anymore. But Indian diaspora can contribute revenue, exchequer, money, cultural influence, policy making, and that has to be factored in. So I think Prime Minister's diplomacy, if I say that is limited to the cultural connectivity, is to reduce the argument. I would say that the Prime Minister's diplomacy is very, very innovative, and I think only after Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he is the only Prime Minister who has actually harvested, or if to use the word, utilized the power of diaspora, is Narendra Modi. Mahatma Gandhi sent Jawaharlal Nehru in 1938 abroad to campaign against fascism and campaign against India's independence. And that's how Indian networks were built abroad. What was Vivekananda's Chicago address to the world? There was Indian diaspora there. Indians were out there. So what Prime Minister Modi is trying to do is he's trying to harness the Indian might abroad. You might be large in number, but you might not be good at the might. I think he's trying to build the might out of the diaspora.
Right, very aptly put out there that Indian Prime Minister is trying to harness the Indian might abroad, and what we can see are live visuals coming in from Jakarta, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to arrive at the Presidential Palace for an official welcome. Karthike, very rightly put out there by you that, the Indian community and the Indian diaspora in Indonesia is, of course, very sizable. And both countries, let's not forget, are maritime neighbors also. And the distance between the two countries in terms of nautical miles is also quite less. This also has implications on maritime security and counter-terrorism or anti-piracy operations as well.
See, when I talk about, when we talk about maritime neighborhood, Andaman was never considered to be a trading outpost by India. See, we have to be very, very clear. Sometimes policy gets lost in translation. Andaman was always treated like a strategic asset. That is why you have a united command in Andaman. Andaman is not open to any Indian for tourism. Barely dozen islands are open. No Indian can go to Nicobar Island apart from the intelligence and defense community. It's there to protect the indigenous population. The only time Andamans and the Nicobar got open was when the tsunami hit in 2004, when journalists landed it in various parts of Nicobar or Indra Point to see it destroyed by the tsunami. So the Indra Point, which is the last point of Andaman, is 100 nautical miles from Banda Aceh. Now, to say that why there is no trade, because India never thought of having a maritime trade. There was maritime trade from Tamil Nadu and Odisha during ancient times.
Right.
There was war, there was conquest. It was known as Swarna Bhumi. It was not known as Indonesia. So things changed. So that concept never existed. India was far more connected through Persia and Western Asia and Central Asia. So connectivity towards the East was not there. It was towards the West historically. That is why Indian Islam has far more Persian influence than Saudi Islam, despite the fact that Islam was born in Saudi Arabia. So we have to understand that the look east is a modern product. It is for this reason that British created NIFA and there was an inner line permit. But over a period of time, we understand that these are the cultures and the territories and the geographies. If India interacts with them, it will prosper with them. It will grow with them. So it's a modern effort. There was an ancient connection which is reflected through spread of Hinduism, but it was lost in medieval and early modern era.
Right. And as we speak, Karthikeya, there are some beautiful visuals coming in of the ceremony, the grand reception that is all set to take place at the Presidential Palace for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And let's take you to these visuals for a few more minutes. So, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just arrived at the President's Palace, and it is here that we just saw some grand visuals of his welcoming ceremony. As you can see, a lot of school children awaiting his presence. They are here to welcome Prime Minister, and there we can also see President Joko Widodo at the porch to welcome Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he steps out of the car. These are live visuals being streamed from Jakarta. There, Indian Prime Minister being greeted by Indonesian President Joko Widodo. A pretty firm handshake over there as he's ushered inside the Presidential Palace. It was shortly before his arrival that a grand welcome took place. In a short while from now, the Indian Prime Minister is also expected to address the press. This is the Istana Merdeka in Jakarta. And these are live visuals coming in of Prime Minister's arrival. As we just saw, the Prime Minister arrived at Istana Merdeka and his official welcoming ceremony is currently underway. As he is warmly received by Indonesian President Joko Widodo. This is the grand official welcome taking place. To run us through the itinerary of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, it was earlier that we saw Prime Minister laying the wreath at Kalibata National Heroes Cemetery, and now it's the official welcoming ceremony that is taking place at Istana Merdeka. And later, in some minutes from now, Indian Prime Minister will be having a tete-a-tete with Indonesian President, and shortly from then they will be moving forward for the delegation level talks, and roughly at 10:30 a.m. IST an exchange of agreements and press statements will be taking place, followed by a joint inauguration of the kite exhibition at the National Monument. And the kite exhibition, as we all know, is an integral part of Indonesia's culture. And And the kite festival actually kick-starts today in the midst of PM Modi's visit to Indonesia. In fact, the festival will be inaugurated by Indian Prime Minister and Indonesian President Joko Widodo. These are live visuals coming in of Indian Prime Minister's grand official welcome at Istana Merdeka in Jakarta. Live visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's grand official welcome taking place at the Merdeka Palace in Jakarta. And it's important to note that the Istana Merdeka is also known as the Istana Gambhir, is one of the 6 presidential palaces in Indonesia. It is located on the north side of Merdeka Square in central Jakarta, Indonesia, and is used as the official residence of the President of the Republic of Indonesia, that is Joko Widodo. And to bring us more details, I'm joined in by political editor Mr. Kartikeya Sharma. Kartikeya, some very grand visuals of a very opulent ceremony taking place over there in Istana Merdeka to welcome Indian Prime Minister. It's indeed important to note the historical significance of the Merdeka Palace.
This is the place from where the Dutch used to rule, and this is the place where the Dutch Governor General used to be there. So this was remade after 1949, after the Indonesian independence. Now you have an obelisk there which is more than 100 meter. It stands more than 100 meter tall, and you can go up there by a lift, see the whole of Jakarta skyline, and that's dedicated to that's a symbol of victory over colonial power. So there are many important places in many of the countries, like for example, a relative example, like our India Gate, but India Gate does not house right away the president's house. You have to go to the Rajpath at the end of the Raisina Hill is the president's house. So something like that, I would say, that that's the central part of it, where the office and the residence and the important markers of independence and post-independent Indonesia is there. Indonesians are warm people, unlike Myanmar, other places where Indians have, or even South Africa, where Indians have faced a lot of heat in terms of, I would say, in terms of interaction with other communities, economy, society. Indonesians have treated Indians very kindly. No persecution has taken place. In Myanmar, the properties were seized. The rich Indians became poor. The land was taken away. Today, in Myanmar, Indians aren't rich. They're trying to make up for what they had. But in Indonesia, it's not like that. Tamilians are part of the rubber plantation. Tamilians have migrated to many places. They have migrated to Indonesia, Myanmar, voluntary migration. So there were 2 kinds of migration. In Indonesia, because British were not there, so migration from India was voluntary. It was not as if they were taken from various places from eastern UP and Bihar, right, and they were sent to Fiji, they were sent to Caribbeans, they were sent to Mauritius, for hard labor, plantation. Here it was voluntary. That is why you have Sindhi migrants who are prosperous trading community. You have Tamilians in rubber plantation. Now you have 50,000 expats working in Jakarta, and these expats are in digital economy. They are entrepreneurs. They are in business. They are looking at. You have strategic affair experts. So that way, I think Indians have done very well in Indonesia. But I think relationship needs to be taken to the next level.
All right, and what do you mean by relationship needs to be taken to the next level? That also brings me to my next question. What can we expect during the delegation level talks to take place, Karthikeyan?
I think a strategic partnership. The trade, India has a trade deficit with Indonesia. The trade deficit has to be handled well. There has to be a strategic partnership whereby India and Indonesia can militarily cooperate with each other. I'm not saying that Indonesia and the relationship should seen from the prism of China, because that would be limiting themselves. I think they should open themselves to the larger possibilities in the world as partners. I would say that apart from commodity trading, there should be other trades too. India should be far more, I think, should become conducive for the Indonesian people to come here. It should allow Indonesian students to study in our universities. The medical facilities should be available. When you come to Indonesia, Akansha, you pay $35 and you walk in with your passport. It's a visa at arrival. No harassment, no question asked. You just walk out of the airport. But that's not the case. If there's a medical treatment by any Indian or even Indonesian, the closest places for them are to go to Penang, Kuala Lumpur, or Singapore. They can't go to Chennai like that. So these are the issues which I would say, if resolved, can take our relationship to the next level. Because in the 21st century, it's not only the capital which is moving, labor also moves. So people, when I use the word labor, I mean people, because labor is very Marxist in terminology, that's capital and labor. I would say if the money is circulating faster, so are the people. And I think the facilitation of people-to-people movement or people-to-people interaction is true globalization, which unfortunately in countries like America, which is made of immigrants, is being resisted.
Right. Karthikeyan, also, both the nations, in terms of, sharing interests, they have common interests. Will China's presence in the South China Sea also be a part of the agenda during the talks? And it is indeed a common concern, we all know, for Indonesia and India both.
I think it's a common concern, but please understand that China is a superior power in terms of military and economy. It is asserting itself as a co-hegemon with the United States of America. But the Indian lesson is diplomacy can only succeed if you're economically and militarily powerful.
Right.
After the rise of the United States of America as a superpower, the only economic power which gave challenge to America was Japan. But Japan was a political pygmy, it had no army. So India will be respected by China if it is matched by by military and economic ambition. And that is why we realize that despite the fact that Nehruvian diplomacy was very nice and beautiful, but at the same time it was naive also. And that is why we got attacked by China.
All right, Karthikeyan, we have live visuals coming in from Istana Merdeka, and the Prime Minister is now inside the palace. Of course, greeted by a firm handshake by the Indonesian President Joko Widodo. The delegation level talks are all set to take place now. So that was Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who just received a rousing reception at the Istana Merdeka, one of the 6 presidential palaces in Indonesia. And as we saw earlier, the Prime Minister is all set to kickstart the delegation-level talks with President Widodo. They should be underway any time now. All right. I'm also joined in by our political editor Kartikeya Sharma from Jakarta. Kartikeya, we just saw Prime Minister Modi. He is inside the palace and the delegation level talks are all set to take place now. What can we finally expect to emerge from these talks?
See, I think the talks, as I said, concrete announcement on infrastructure will take place. Concrete announcement on defense will take place. And I think these are the two key areas where we should look for. But there's another area on which Indonesian government is very, very interested. When I came here, Indians were talking about tourism. Tourism generates a lot of money for the economy. Tourism generates a lot of employment. You have boutique tourism, you have mass scale tourism, you have luxury tourism, you have beach tourism, you have forest tourism. Indonesia is an archipelago. They have 17,000 islands. Indonesia starts 100 kilometers away from the Andamans, and it stretches all the way itself to the North Pacific Ocean. And you'll take 5 hours from one end to another end to cross Indonesia on a plane. That's how big Indonesia is. That's how long Indonesia is. So I think Indonesia is a hidden gem. There are a number of places where people don't go, people don't know about, but Indonesians know about. But for the world, Indonesia is only about Bali. Now, it is for this reason, for the first time you have a direct flight from Mumbai to Bali. You want to go to Bali directly, but still from Delhi, Mumbai, Bali, or Mumbai, Bali. But there are no direct flights to Jakarta. I had to go to Singapore to go to Jakarta. It's like, and that's the sad part. Last time, when I wanted to go to Myanmar, there was one flight from Delhi, Calcutta, which would go to Naypyidaw, which is the capital of Myanmar, but it's a ghost city. It's a city for lakhs and lakhs of people, but barely 1 or 2 lakh people work there. It's like it's a city with 16-lane highway inside. So and made in the middle of the forest. So right. No one lives there. It's like, city is silent through the day. You can't walk in that city. But there's no direct flight to Yangon. You have to, the choices were either you go to Bali and fly back, or you go to Jakarta True. Or fly back, or you go to Bangkok or fly back. So, these, as you rightly said, this is what Look East is. This is what Act East is. If you want to act East, if you want to look East, if you want to breathe East, then you got to connect to the East.
Right. Kartikeya, also, it's important to mention that, Indonesia is the largest trading partner of India in terms of the ASEAN region, with bilateral trade, in billions of dollars. India is also a source of military hardware for Indonesia. So how can they further strengthen the trade partnership between the two countries?
See, the problem is that, basic trade partnership is commodity, which is, what do you do? Timber, tea, logs, coal, which is basic. What was colonial trading? Colonial trading was on the natural resources. And on the basis of the natural resources, the industrialization of the West took place. Now, every country is industrialized. It's the pace of industry, the type of industry, the nature of industry which makes a difference. America is all about defense and space industry. India is software. China is manufacturing. Ship making, it's South Korea. Japanese, it's automation, robotics, and miniaturization of technology. So it depends. So when we talk about Indonesia, our partnership can be at multiple levels. Right. It can be seen from multiple contexts. In banking, infrastructure, digital, economy, Bollywood.
True.
Bollywood is very famous. So, there are a lot of things on which the interaction can take place, but one has to wait now as to what can be hammered out. See, in diplomacy, there is something called goodwill. There is something called vehicle of goodwill, but there is something called delivery. I think we'll have to wait a little as to what is being delivered today.
Absolutely. The deliverables are something to be going. We should be watching out for. And these are visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi on your screen. He has just received a grand welcome by President Widodo of Indonesia. Karthikeyan, that also brings me to my next question. Do you see any similarities between the two leaders of Indonesia and India? Both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Widodo, we know, are self-made leaders. Do you see any similarities in terms of their strategies and political planning?
See, both are, there is one similarity. Okay, that's a good question you have asked me, Akansha. Both the leaders are similar in one nature. They are very popular in their own country. Narendra Modi is very popular in his country. Widodo is also very popular in his own country. They are mass leaders. Long exchequered careers, no case of corruption against them. And both of them will be going to polls next year, which means that both Modi and Widodo, if they don't win the election, will not meet again. So for both of them, next year is very, very important. And both of them believe that the most important thing any president or prime minister, the premier of the country should do is to create infrastructure. Because infrastructure means that you create comfort for civilians. What is infrastructure? People in India think infrastructure is road. No, I completely disagree. Infrastructure is not only about road, because India that way is poor in the hinterland areas. Infrastructure is about connectivity. Infrastructure is about quality of life. For example, infrastructure is, do you have clean toilets in market area? That's infrastructure. Do you have small, good pathways for pedestrians? That's infrastructure. Do you have modern light-saving, daylight-saving buildings? That's infrastructure. Do you have elevated metros? That is infrastructure. So the definition of infrastructure has expanded. It's not cement. Infrastructure is the quality of life. Infrastructure is not wall. So I think both of them believe that if infrastructure can be improved, that the life of the population can be significantly raised, it can be significantly improved. So I think both of them believe in this philosophy of infrastructure. And I think that is why I would give more importance to as to what they will announce in terms of the infrastructure portfolio. What will be the nature of collaboration, I do not know. They have kept it under wraps. But there is something. I have been told by my sources in MEA that some important announcement will take place. And that announcement will take place today only. And it will be in the collaborative spirit.
Right. Absolutely, Karthikeyan. Let's hope that their common interests actually also reflect upon the collaborations that India and Indonesia embark upon. On that note, thank you so much for joining us on this live bulletin. We will continue to track all the details of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Indonesia.